speed? Okay.
It just says record, correct?
That's right. Okay. Well, Dr. Ikenberry, thanks for letting us do this. We certainly appreciate the opportunity.
Well, welcome to the University of Illinois.
Good to be here. 16 years is quite a long run for a university president in this day and age. How did you do that?
Well, I guess one thing you have to do is start when you're relatively young. I turned out to be the youngest president to have been appointed to lead the University of Illinois. So I guess that's one thing that helps. But the University of Illinois is a great place, and I think for me it was very difficult to imagine wanting to go anyplace else.
The University of Illinois is the flagship for the Illinois higher education system. Could you give me a brief overview of how it fits in that system?
Well, the University of Illinois is the state's, if you will, land-grant university, but we're also the state's major leading state university in the sense that we're the major center for graduate education and research in a broad range of fields, and we serve large numbers of undergraduate students. We have 60,000 students plus now, including both our Chicago campuses, the Urbana-Champaign campus, and of course now newly arrived our Springfield campus.
There's one stray hair right up there.
Okay.
You could brush
Is it?
right on the side.
Oh, I see.
The other side.
Other side.
Let's see.
You don't mind? Well, what's happening is the backlight is catching it a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, that looks fine. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A university with this size and scope of activities has a lot of constituencies that it must serve, from the students and the faculty, the public in general. You have state government, corporate America, a lot of different people who have different ideas on how such an institution should run. What sort of challenge does that pose for a person in your position?
I think part of the uniqueness of a college or a university is the large number of constituencies that are involved. We are, in a way, more of a community than we are an institution. Certainly, I think you begin with the students, and every year they're new, every year their interests are somewhat different. But the faculty as well, the staff, as in any large corporate type setting. The interesting thing, though, is that there are many stakeholders out across the society in the university. Our alumni obviously are interested, but corporate America is interested in the health of higher education, and certainly that's been true here in Illinois. Illinois agriculture has a major stake, but virtually every profession in the state, from medicine to accounting to architecture to law to nursing to social work, has a very real stake on what goes on at the University of Illinois. So in that sense, it's a very complex tapestry that links the University of Illinois with the people of this state.
How does one balance all those competing interests?
You hope for the most of the time they don't compete. Most of the time they're synergistic. For example, a high-quality, absolutely superb undergraduate education is very important long-term to the quality of research and public service in the state. Great programs, for example, in mathematics and physics and chemistry also bode well for a top-quality, first-ranked School of Engineering. Great programs in biology, for example, mean that it's an awful lot easier to have a top-ranked College of Agriculture. There are times when interests do compete, and those happen most frequently when resources are scarce or where the university finds itself in a period of contraction and belt-tightening as opposed to expansion. But for most of the time, happily, the interests are positive, and they tend to build one on the other, and that's been, I think, one of the great strengths of the University of Illinois, that we've been able many times to help make that happen.
There's been great growth in academic programs, centers of excellence here at U of I during your tenure, at a time when higher education resources nationwide have, a lot of universities have been doing some belt tightening. does that make, well, that obviously makes the job of president or chief operational officer much more difficult because you have to, you would be faced with finding which areas deserve the most attention, finding the proper focus.
Well, of course, having the right focus, having some sense of vision is what is important, not just in a university, but in almost any area of the society one can point to. Universities, if they're worth anything at all, always have more good ideas than they have resources. So one never has as many resources, particularly in a really good place. You never have as much as you need to do everything you want to do. So setting priorities, making choices, that's really what happens day in and day out, year in and year out. We've tried to focus in two ways, really. One, trying to make the University of Illinois uniformly good in everything that we attempt and work on. And at the same time, we've not hesitated to try to pick out and target very special areas of emphasis. I would cite, for example, the Beckman Institute for Advanced Science and Technology, which is really very remarkable kind of program that is unique to the University of Illinois. It's an interdisciplinary advanced graduate education and research program that brings senior scholars from all across the university. It's been very instrumental in allowing us to recruit top scholars from across the country and is now recognized, I think, throughout the United States as a very special place. But I would also cite, for example, the work we're doing in microelectronics, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, and our Great Cities program in Chicago. So trying to have some very high standards for how all aspects of the university will perform, while at the same time not hesitating to pick out a few special centers of excellence. That's basically been our strategy.
The Great Cities program goes to something I know that you value quite highly, and that is the university and its proper role in the society or the community that it serves. Could you talk a little bit about how that came about and where you see that going?
The Great Cities program, ironically enough, grows out of the university's land grant tradition that's rooted in agriculture, if you will, in rural America. But under Jim Stuckel's leadership, Jim had a different view of what could happen and what ought to happen, with the major challenges of our society now being so heavily concentrated in the metropolitan areas, and the university being one of the principal sources of strength within that environment that will allow many of those problems to be addressed. So we did establish the Great Cities program. It is now making a real difference in Chicago in a number of areas. I think most notably that comes to my mind is the reform movement in elementary and secondary education that's taking place in the Chicago public schools. But, for example, making Chicago a safe city and dealing with issues related to criminal justice, making Chicago a productive city as it relates to employment and productivity and the health of the economic sector in Chicago. All of those are the concern of the Great Cities program, and in a way that's very consistent with what we continue to do today to make Illinois strong in terms of the agricultural industries and also the rural communities throughout Illinois.
Here you have in a very demonstrable way a direct link so that people in the community can see the relevance of their institutions of higher education. And I'm sure that cuts through a lot of different programs that you have here.
Part of our history at the University of Illinois was this curious notion that universities and knowledge ought to be useful. And it goes back to our very founding. We really weren't founded to be an ivory tower, so we've tried to capture that sense of utility, usefulness, productivity, making sure that the people of Illinois, the people of the nation, really receive a high return, if you will, on the investment. So that's been part of our heritage, and I think it's been reinvented here of late in very exciting ways.
You lectured recently on universities reaffirming their public character, and this really goes right to the heart of that.
Well, across the country, as universities public universities such as ours have faced difficult economic times and stresses, one of the responses to that has been to say, well, we give up. We're going to reshape ourselves as if we were a private university. I think private universities constitute one of the great strengths of this country, but also another great strength is that we have a great diversity of higher education in this country. And if public universities model themselves out of the private sector, it's going to leave a tremendous public service void. So the choice at the University of Illinois has been to rededicate ourselves, if you will, to being the state's leading public university, and at the same time being a university of national reputation that ranks in the top 10, we would like to think, among public universities in any place in this country, and ranking very high, comparably high, and among private universities as well.
When you were talking about private universities, I was thinking in particular of the issues of access and affordability for students. This is a vital need that U of I and other public universities fill.
Higher education has to address the accessibility issue and has to get a control on costs. Early in this decade, just prior actually to the beginning of the decade of the 90s, the University of Illinois made a commitment to hold our tuition increases more or less in the decade to inflation. We've been able to do that, and most of higher education now is getting a good handle on the price increase issue. But that's a great asset, even though the University of Illinois in 1996 is more expensive than we were in 1986 for sure, even in 1956. Nonetheless, we're an incredible bargain, and the ability to maintain high-quality educational opportunity and to give access to Illinois citizens at a reasonable, affordable price, that's a tremendous social asset, and it's a tremendous advantage to the state of Illinois in not only building high-quality cities and communities across this state, but allowing human beings really to achieve the American dream. That's education is central to that.
I'd like to go back and touch upon a couple of themes you talked about earlier about how the university targeted things like the applied sciences, the Beckman Center, advanced sciences, the Beckman Center, superconducting, the
National
ahead of myself.
National Center.
Supercomputing.
Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking back to a different
That's right.
interview, unfortunately. When you sit down in a community of scholars like this, how does one build the consensus that it takes to go out and attack themes like these and build in these areas?
Well, in the case, for example, of the Beckman Institute for Advanced Science and Technology, or also in the case of the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, these ideas basically come up through the grassroots. So it's generally not the president of the university sitting in his or her office and deciding on some Monday morning, let's create the Beckman Institute for Advanced Science and Technology. Mort Weir, who was at that time Vice President for Academic Affairs, and Ted Brown, who ultimately turned out to serve as the first director of the Beckman Institute, led a team of scholars in the university to begin to think what the new world of scholarship would look like and how we could bring the disparate disciplines back together and how we could create a physical environment that could allow faculty members to do wholly new things in their professional settings. It was that plan that came forward that I then took to Arnold Beckman and reviewed with him, and I think he had the same reaction, the same sense of excitement and promise that those of us here who looked at that. So the way I have found that one builds consensus is really to start out with a fundamentally sound idea. Generally, I've found that tends to come from the brightest and the best and the most dedicated of our faculty, and then in turn talk to an Arnold Beckman, talk to the business community, talk to the governor, talk to the legislative leaders, talk to our alumni, and more often than not, those individuals that you talk to can't help but become excited about the same opportunities that excite the rest of us.
How we doing on tape, Jeff?
I have about 2 or 3 minutes left.
Okay, let's go ahead and pop another pen then. Because I think the next question will probably